Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. While we continue to do this little mini series about systematic trading and back testing, and having a really good time there. Last time we talked a lot about being stuck in backtest world and kind of what would be needed to get out of backtest world and get into the real world. In this episode, we're going to talk about, okay, so what happens if you get there and it's not at all like backtest world? What could have possibly go wrong? Things to look at, potentially things to help yourself out with. So, Dave, I'll let you lead off with probably what will be the most obvious answer. So you got a backtest. The backtest looks great. You go to trade it live, completely falls apart, or at least in part falls apart. What's the first thing you go and look at?
Yeah, well, just to set the stage a little more, this is the point in which most traders' workflow where they pay the most tuition. And by
Mm-hmm.
tuition, I mean, you know, losses.
Yeah.
And that's because think about your back test, and at that very point where you're done with your back test, right? You're so confident in your strategy. You look at this equity curve, like how can this possibly? Like I've made it, I've done it. It's time to start raking in the bucks, right? So you're super confident at that point. And when you go live, it often takes time for that confidence to erode.
Mm-hmm.
And the more experience you have with this and the more you understand what can go wrong when you go live, the better off you're going to be and the less tuition you're going to be. I mean, when I think back on my career, I mean, I think the part where I've had the most losses is at this point where you've done a great,
Oh yeah.
what looks like a great back test. You can't possibly go wrong, and then you start trading it live, and you kind of either forget about it or like a little too much time goes by before you realize, okay, it's not what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to have a process for doing this and have this phase where you're not trying to make money. You're trying to gather more data and understand how your system's going to work. That's the really important thing. Most people are at this point and they're like, all right, how can I make money with this? And that's really, of course, trading's about making money. But at this point, it's not about making money. And it's very tempting for it to be, for that to be the thought going through your head. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, as we get into these, it's so important to think about this ahead of time. We talked last week about the pre-mortem, Andy
Mm-hmm.
Duke's concept for predicting why this thing might fail beforehand. The better you get at this, the better you're going to get at trading in general. And so I encourage everybody to listen to this whole episode. We're going to go through a lot of different things to understand why a strategy might fail that you can know about ahead of time. I think this is going to be one of our most valuable ones.
Well, and we talk a lot about binary events versus events on more of a gradient or more granular, and this is a binary one. I think you have to pay more attention to those where you have gone from a complete la la wonderland where everything could be fantastic to real money on the line. If the strategy is going to just completely implode and go from something that the equity curve in your back test is up and to the right and something that just falls apart and goes down to the right, it's probably going to happen like right now. So yeah, there's no other more important time in my opinion just to really make sure you're focusing and you're going back and testing and doing reconciliations and kind of refining the strategy because yeah, this is it, right? It's either gonna live or
Yeah.
die, kind of in this moment, because there are a couple things again that we'll talk about here that could go horribly wrong. That you did probably something wrong in your back test or something like that, and that you should really make sure that you're looking at and you're kind of figuring out here. So yeah, it's huge important. Some of these are going to be
Yeah.
obvious to a lot of people, and I think some of them might be a little bit surprising.
Yeah. I like the way you say that. Yeah, it is a binary event. Like, yes, you weren't trading it with any money before. Now you're trading it with something above zero. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it is a binary event, but it is a binary event, but there's a lot of things you can do once you identify some of the shortfalls that could happen that you could go and apply to the strategy to alleviate them or minimize the impact. So in that sense, there's no sense in seeing that the actual trades don't measure up to the back test. Man, what a crappy strategy this, or a crappy
Hmm.
back test, right? This is terrible. I'm gonna throw up my hands. Almost in every case, there are ways you can tweak something about the strategy to make it work once you realize what the shortfall is and what you need to do to fix it. So yeah, this is kind of a nitty gritty thing, but the better you are at this, the quicker you're going to understand what's going on, and the
Yeah,
quicker you can improve your strategy, and then for the next strategy, you'll be able to know ahead of time, and you will be able to predict what's going to happen. So you can put that earlier in your process, and you're going to have a more robust strategy out of the gate for the next time.
absolutely. So yeah, let's get some of the more obvious ones out of the way and just go, okay, I have come to you, Dave, and I'm not me, but I'm someone who might be newer to trading or newer to systematic trading. And I say, man, I had this good thing in backtest, and in the real world, it's just not working, right? What's the first thing you go to and
Yeah.
say, right, check this, right? Because it's in most cases probably going to be bad.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I do is I say, okay, what does the back test look like? Because some people aren't even checking the back test. And that's the first thing you should do.
Hmm.
I mean, just think you've created this entire strategy based on the back test. So all of a sudden people go out of backtest world into live trading, and to have that disconnect where you're not looking at the backtest still, that's a big mistake. I mean, this is what sets great traders apart from other traders. Like, you've got this back test, you've got this awesome reference that you can use going forward to figure out what's going on. Otherwise, if you didn't have the back test, you would be completely rudderless.
Yep.
It would take a long period of time for you to understand, well, okay, this strategy is just not working. If you got that back test, you can find out real fast what's going on. I mean, just in a day or two,
Hmm.
if you've got enough trades in it to see, okay, um, so the biggest thing that causes live trading to not measure up to the back test is missing big profitable trades.
Yep.
That's like the number one reason. Because and if you miss those, the strategy will fall apart really fast.
Really
And,
fast. Yeah.
and so that's the most important thing to watch for, and understand. Okay, what's happening here with the big winners? Am I catching those? Am I missing those? If I'm missing them, why? That's the first question. Like, look at these. Look at the big trades, the big profitable trades that the back test thinks it's can get, and make sure you're getting those in live.
Yeah, and that's, to kind of bury bury the lead, or to start with it anyways, that's the whole going to be the whole point here, right? Like we joked a little bit about on Reddit, where people, will say, hey, is this a good back test or is this a bad back test? And then the top answer is always go trade it and find out. In this case, what we're saying is you have to go back to the back test just to know if it's a normal thing or not, right? So it's first defining what is not working, for lack of a better term, right? Is not working just, okay, I turned on the system and it started to lose money. Well, go back to the back test. If your back test is losing the exact same amount of money, well, then it's acting perfectly as intended. And then it gets to kind of diving under the hood. Is it that you're missing every trade? Is it a liquidity problem where every single trade is just a little bit worse than you expected, and that's what's dragging it down? Or like Dave was saying, is it the fact that maybe the system's designed to have 10 trades and 9 of them are just whatever mediocre, and then there's one big one, and you're constantly missing that one big one. So
Yeah.
the biggest tip I think anyone can give is this is the time you should always be reconciling to the back test, but this is the most important time to do it ever, where every day when I'm running something new, if it's a daily strategy, I am downloading, this is what the back test should have said, this is what I actually have, and just there's a lot of ways to kind of systematize this and to make it faster and to cheat it, but I think especially at the beginning, this is just a line by line, right? You look at the entry of one trade and then the exit and then the entry and then the exit, because you're almost like an accountant at this point. Your job is
Yeah.
is like a tax accountant. You have to go and figure out what's that difference, because that's the place that you're really going to have to dive into. And it's not the most fun work in trading, but it's brushing your teeth. You have to do it.
Yeah. And, we talked about ChatGPT a couple weeks ago. This is like tailor made. This problem is tailor made for ChatGPT because it
Hmm.
can. So I've got automation for doing this reconciliation. And the very first thing I'm looking for is, okay, what trades did I not take that the back test did take?
Right.
And you could do a quick, I've got a quick Python script that just does that and spits it right out. Here's the ones you missed. Um, and then I'll look at, if there are ones I'm missing, I want to go back and see why I'm missing them. What was what's my entry order there? And go and figure out, okay, can I make my entry order a little bit more aggressive to catch these?
Hmm.
And uh, a really important tool to do this, which I don't think a lot of traders use, is time and sales.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
It's just, this is, if you go to time and sales, most trading platforms, most brokers give you access to it. It's basically a historical view of the bid and the ask and the trades
Hmm.
as they happened. So if you think about that data, it's an immense amount of data. So it's really important to get good at figuring out, okay, what was my order at the time? What was the bid and the ask at the time? What were the trades happening at the time? What would it have taken for my order to have executed at that time?
Yeah.
And you can go back and use time and sales to figure that out.
Yeah, and you don't need to. A lot of people will look at that and they'll see the time and sales for the day. Of course, you don't care about the whole day, right? You're caring about, so you need to just pull that out in that specific point in time around the fill. I've also found that, for fast scanning, obviously time and sales dig in, fast scanning, finding like a really short term chart, even like a tick chart or something, and zooming into that time can give you somewhat of an understanding of what the liquidity was at that time. But yeah, the time and sales will tell you exactly what you needed to get filled at the exact second that your order went out. If you're buying, where was the ask, right? Was it too far
Yeah.
away? How fast was it moving, right? So look at the speed from print to print. Is it moving 10 cents every print? Is it moving 20 cents every print? That would be a more aggressive order, because again, in most scenarios, if your back test is not working, and I think we're kind of glossing over, you just did a bad back test. It had forward looking bias or something in it like that. But in the scenario that your back test was clean and you did everything right, then yeah, the issue generally lies in your fill. So you have to be able to zoom into that period of time and say, what did the market look like? I also think there's a huge advantage of watching live still, especially when the strategy is just getting off the ground, is looking at the order the second it went there, and clicking on it there and bringing up that stock and saying, okay, what does the stock look like right now? It's not as scientific, but it can sometimes give you a pretty good feel of, okay, this is how the stock was moving at the time that I was trying to get my fill.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these scenarios you don't have to actually trade live to understand. So you can just watch it play out in real time, even though you're not trading it or paper trading it.
Hmm.
And a lot of stuff there'll be some aha moments there because you realize, oh, okay, well, obviously the back test couldn't capture the thing I just saw there. Um, so there is, speaking of time and sales, there is a tool that I have access to from NASDAQ that gives you an awesome visualization of time and sales. And it's really good because, time and sales, if you go into like in interactive brokers, it's kind of a pain to look at. There's an immense amount of data in there. It's all like line by line when the bid and the ask change. and a trade comes through. But this tool from NASDAQ is a really awesome visualization of exactly what's going on. And you can see it. It's a very, very helpful. It's expensive. Um, I subscribe to it and I give the traders that I work with a view into it and use of it. It's a really powerful tool. We'll put a link to it in the show notes if you're interested.
Yeah, because yeah, again, whether however you get it, it's super important, right? For me, I think it's one of those you can find a lot of freer versions that you're right. It's going to not be nearly as nice to look through. You're going to have to kind of export something into Excel and then zoom into that time and kind of scroll through. So, it's one of those that the cost is not an excuse because you can certainly do it anyway. But yeah, there's definitely better ways to do it. I've even seen charting platforms out there. I wonder if TradingView can do it. I'm not too sure. That actually charts out the bid and the ask uh, and moves the bid and the ask like two kind of line charts separate. So you could go to
Mm-hmm.
that point in time and kind of watch it and see what would have happened at that time. But yeah, there's going to be tons of ways to do it. Everyone's going to have their own kind of cool way to take a look at it. But absolutely. So let's say it was liquidity, right? Let's say liquidity was the problem. So you kind of said everything is repairable. Um, what does the person do? Do they go to their back test and they crank up the liquidity and see what happens if they're trading higher liquid stocks? Do they go over to maybe looking at trying to get a better fill on the fill side of things? Like which side do you try to fix first, the back test or the actual live world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would first look at I'm looking at the time and sales, and I'm looking at, okay, what would my price have needed to have been in my order to get this fill
Hmm.
at this time? And that's kind of a painstaking process. And a lot of times you can glean some things there that you can go back and apply to the back test. Like, so let's say you find some big winning trades that you missed because of your entry order, and you think that you could make your order, you know, let's say 5 cents more aggressive so that you can get some of those fills.
Hmm.
Well, you could go back to the back test and extrapolate that and say, okay, well, what would what happens to my back test if all my fills are 5 cents worse? Does it fall apart? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. And um, usually, usually you've got some buffer in there to that your strategy can be profitable with this buffer in place. So after many years of doing this, I always have some threshold that I know that the shortfall is going to be, and I include that sort of mentally in the back of my mind in the back test. So I know that, okay, I'm not going to get exactly what's in the back test in terms of profit. I'm not going to get
Hmm.
100% of that, but I'm going to get 70% of it. So I know that I can figure that out ahead of time. So I know that in as part of my optimization process, I can have that in the back of my mind. So I know that I need to get beyond what it seems like I should be to make my strategy a little bit better, knowing that, okay, I'm going to lose a lot to all the things we're talking about here: missed trades, slippage due to liquidity, all these
Hmm.
types of things. So I think about that ahead of time.
Well, and I wouldn't even just think about it, right? You should probably be program some of that in as well, right? So that's part of the stress testing that I do for a lot of my systems, where you build a slippage factor, and then you start to kind of crank that up and just see at what point is that is that problematic. And then I know at least in real tests, I'm sure you can probably do this in a lot of the back testers too. There's a skip random trades function. And right, so I will run the script or run the back test, maybe 5 or 6 times over, skipping random trades just to see how much there would be a different effect there, because that's part of the testing, and part of the reason a lot of people do Monte Carlo stuff, even though I'm usually not super excited about it. But the idea is that if you can randomize the trades that you miss and you run that 5 or 10 times, and you get kind of some understanding of, okay, I'm going to miss X percentage of trades. Does my system hold up in the long run? That's great. So that should be part of the stress testing. But you're 100% right, where you can't plan it perfectly, right? You don't know until you actually go in. But just a nice little tip to say, hey, when you're back testing, make sure you're doing some of that. If one little variable like that just kind of breaks your system's not really that great, right? So make sure it can stand up to some kind of robustness and some things going wrong.
Yeah. There's also some other things you can do to try to capture some of these trades. So you could use a different entry order. Um, you know, a lot of these, there's some situations where you can use a different order type and get the fill. For example, if you're using, if your trade is close to the open and you can create an on open order, there's a lot more liquidity in those on open orders
Hmm.
than there are in just regular limit orders in the market. So you would, I'm sure a lot of the listeners and you, Michael, if you saw some of the fills I get for some of the strategies I run, your stomach would drop because there's some pretty light. The names and symbols that get in are pretty light, surprisingly light for a lot of traders, I would think.
Well, and I think, but that also comes to position sizing in those different symbols, right? It's a lot easier to stomach taking a very low volume symbol and trying to work an order here or there when you've already kind of baked in a lot of the problems that could occur, and you're okay with that, right? You understand that slippage can happen, and right, if you had to get out of the position, you're going to take way more of a stop loss or way more of a hit than you could imagine. I think a lot of that is fine, but yeah, especially for new traders, I think, right, they go in, especially there's some brokers out there that will do P&L based off of bid ask as opposed to last. And right,
Yeah.
sometimes if the bid ask really opens up, they go, holy smokes, I just got into the trade and I'm down X. Yeah, that could definitely be worrisome for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah. I work with a lot of traders to uh, modify their strategies so that they can get some fills with some smaller names. There's a lot. So if you think about it, that's your big advantage as a retail trader
Hmm.
is being able to trade strategies that trade some of these low volume names uh, compared to the big boys. You know, a lot of big hedge funds and mutual funds, they couldn't even consider trading some of the strategies that I trade and other traders trade just because they're so much bigger. They
Yeah.
have so much more money to put at work that they have to put to work for it to even be meaningful. With even if you've got a really big account for a retail trader, you're still a drop in the bucket compared to the big players. So that's where your advantage is really going to come from.
Well, and I always look at it as liquidity equals efficiency, and right, efficiency is kind of the enemy of edge, right? So this is why if you're trading futures, the edge you're looking for is going to be smaller. It doesn't mean it's not there, and there's still some advantage to trading higher liquid names even for small edges, generally speaking, when it comes to access to buying power, access to external funds, things like that. But yeah, you got to look at it as a continuum, right? If you're trading incredibly illiquid names, there's going to be way more edge in there than trading Apples and Googles and Nvidias of the world, because yeah, it's just the way it works. Is the more it's I always look at it as like if you're trading XYZ company that's going to do 20, 30,000 shares that day, you're not fighting Goldman Sachs, right? If you're trading Nvidia, you're fighting Goldman Sachs. You're in the same arena as these people. which is why a lot of people, as HFT and algo trading became more prominent, they either went to these lower float and smaller type names to avoid the big guys out there, the Goldman Sachs and all that, or they went higher in time frame where these games don't get played as much. So, yeah, it's just look at it. If you're someone who's trading forex, right, I think is probably the ultimate liquidity and therefore the ultimate lack of edge. Then you have to go in somewhere else, and that's, I guess, also something to look at when you're looking at what's wrong with your back test to your real world. If you are trading something like forex and there is slippage, something has gone horribly wrong. Whereas if you're trading, a low float, smaller names, less recognized stock name, it's probably more of a chance that it is. So that might be a good way to zoom out and say, okay, let me quickly see what's wrong with what I'm doing. Again, if you're missing your fills on forex, it's probably not liquidity. It's probably something to do with how fast you're getting your signal to your order getting hit, or you're trading around a news event or something like that. Because as someone who's traded forex, it's insanely liquid. You could put $20 million through on a trade, and you're not even going to budge the market at all.
Yeah. It reminds me of another thing you can do to get some of these fills. So when you think about your back test, your back test is assuming that you're going to get that fill in that exact instance.
Hmm.
But in the real world, one of the things you could do, in some cases, you don't need to be in immediately. You might be able to put an order out there and leave it out there for a little bit. And a lot of times the price will come back and you'll get a fill maybe a minute or two later at the price that you want. So that's another thing you can do to sort of match the back test. Even if the back test got in here, you got in at X plus 2 minutes, but at the same price, that could be a win for you and your strategy.
Yeah, as long as no profit target or anything was hit within that time,
Yeah.
who really cares, right? If it's between your stop loss and your profit target, and you're just waiting to get in, and that's something that I do all the time. Where my orders for a lot of the day trading stuff I'm doing are live all day, right? Because they just put the orders out there and away they go. When it comes to things like routing, like different, I know like IEX was a big one for a while, and all these different routes. Have you ever found any advantage in changing your routing option, or do you just simply use, I think Interactive Brokers calls it their smart, where they just get you whatever they think is best at the time? I know some people really ask about that. If I'm on a different exchange, does it somehow make it easier for me to get a fill?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And yeah, the more you can understand that, the better off you'll be. It depends a lot on the strategy and how you're getting in. But yeah, there's most brokerages have a smart route, and I mean, just go look at the fees that you get charged for the smart route versus the direct route on
Hmm.
IB, and you can do the quick math and see, okay, well, it is to IB's advantage for you to be using the smart route. So
That's why it's
there's got to be
the
some money
default,
there.
yeah, in all
Yeah, there's got
cases.
to be some money in doing a direct route. So for sure, uh, there's definitely some advantage to be had in certain strategies for doing a direct route. Yes.
And that's
Um,
well, that's something just to hit on a little more that most traders might not know about. So make sure you're spending some time and just looking at things like order routing with your particular broker. I this all the way goes back to where I was firm trading for a living, and we did a lot of this like credit trading where you could actually get paid to place trades and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. No need to go too deep down the rabbit hole. Just do a quick ECN is the best thing to Google. Like, what is an ECN and different ways into the market, and get yourself familiarized with it. This isn't going to be a massive make or break, but you're playing around the edges, and sometimes if you can make a strategy 1% better by playing around the edges, that's going to add up in the long run. So take some time and
Yeah.
definitely take a look at those.
Yeah. I think with the routing, also with commissions, you're not going to make a terrible strategy great by eliminating those or minimizing those things.
Hmm.
If you're and if that's the case, you can come up with a better strategy to begin with.
Yeah.
But once you have something that's working, and once you dive in and understand how the routing works, understand and look at your commissions and how they're and your fees, then you could make some adjustments at that point, and it can make a big difference. I mean, I remember, um, you know, there were some really. I, I started noticing how much commission I was paying to interactive brokers. There were some years where I don't know, it was in the six figures, and if you just step back and think about that, that's a lot of money. I think I was paying more in commission than I was making from trade ideas for a couple of years there. So I was like, wow, okay, I can that there's a lot to be made here if I make some adjustments. So, but even then, it still wasn't going to be the thing that made my strategy work or not work. So it's still just around the margins.
Should we rant a little bit or at all about how zero commission brokers are not saving you from this? Because
Yeah.
that's I foresee the comment in chat, and again, or in the description. We love the comments, we love talking, but I always want to head that off because I always hear that as a rebuttal. Say, oh well, I'm with
Yeah.
Robinhood and they're not charging me commissions and blah blah, and it's like, yes they are. They're not allowing you to trade out of the kindness of their heart, that it's not altruistic that they're letting you trade. What they're doing is they're essentially selling your order flow. Generally speaking, your fills will be a little bit worse over time,
Yeah.
might even out to be the same if you want to be charitable. Maybe, and I'm not even one that I'm like super anti-payment for order flow. If you're the guy who you want to just, put some money into Apple every week or buy the S&P 500 and walk away, absolutely, these brokers are fine. If you are a serious trader who wants to make sure that you're getting the best fills and all of this, you should be using a broker that doesn't sell your order flow, and in turn is you're paying a commission. At least it just feels more honest that way, where it's like, you are offering this service and I'm paying you this amount of money, even if it's a lot. I know what I'm paying you. If you're doing a zero commission broker, you're paying. It's just not a line item you
Yeah.
can kind of see anywhere, right?
Yeah. And often you're going to get what you pay for. And you have to do this sort of reconciliation to understand and to figure out. But yeah, you're going to get what you pay for, and the fills are going to be poorer,
Hmm.
and there's just no question. And yeah, that's uh, like I said, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah, and it's the kindness of your own heart thing is just, I think, helps out a lot of people. It's like, why do you think they're giving you free commissions, right? They're not. They're giving you, they're making their money. They're just making it somewhere else so they can kind of hide it as a line item, so you don't feel like you're getting charged, but
Yeah,
you're still getting charged. And I just wanted to kind of front run that again. Our audience may already know this, but some people really do think that they're saving a lot because they're not looking at the dollar amount that they're trading at the end of the day. But believe me, Robinhood's getting its money. I'm just look down at the stock; it's hitting all-time highs. They're doing fantastic financially, and they wouldn't be if they were actually giving you kind of free routing and good fills and all that kind of stuff. They wouldn't be
sure.
a couple billion-dollar company at this point.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to another reason that a back test or your live trading might fall short of the back test. Another good one is you might have more trades than you can actually take.
Mm,
So you may have more signals than you can process. So sort of like the old "I Love Lucy" with Lucille Ball, where she's on the chocolate factory,
yeah.
and this conveyor belt's coming, and things are fine for a while, but then it comes at too fast a rate, and she kind of throws up her hands, and it gets kind of funny. You can uh, that could be the same thing in live trading that you can't really see in your back test. Your back test, it's not coming in real time, so it's going to get all the trades.
Hmm.
So that's another thing that you can work on your process and uh, figure out how you can take more trades. That might be introduce automation. And that's a big reason that I created the robot that I trade with is specifically for this. And uh, and that opens up a whole new set of strategies that you can trade
Yes.
if you're able to do that. Like imagine if let's say the most you can take manually now is what, one trade every minute or two? Well, what if you could take 10 trades a minute? What if you
Hmm.
could take more? Then all of a sudden there's a lot more strategies that are available to you that you can trade profitably.
Well, and that just opens up the broader topic of why your back test could be falling apart in the real world if we just kind of classify all that as human error, right? That's another thing, that if you are
Yeah.
placing the trades yourself, you're placing the trades manually, that has to be an item in kind of your reconciliation process. Is, you know, maybe you miscalculated a size, or you typed in a wrong number, or you were just slow to the draw, or any number of things that us, humans, can do, is to do that. Now, I'm for one that, me and Dave have been talking all the time, that the only time that day trading interests me at all is when I can kind of push off the responsibility of that kind of stuff to the bot, because I know personally I am really bad at that. I'm really bad at, rogue trading, and I'm really bad at revenge stuff, and even just not being able to think that's fast on the fly, putting in wrong orders, doing all that. But that, when I am trading, that is definitely part of my reconciliation. Is Was the problem that the alert came through, and by the time I put in the trade, I couldn't get the fill? That's one problem. That's like a liquidity, a speed thing, that kind of thing. Is it the fact that I miscalculated something? That's a completely different problem. That's something that is, again, human error, and has to be looked at differently. One is, maybe you redesign the way you're putting out orders, or maybe you redesign your strategy. The other one is just more of, you have to find a way to systematize. So, for example, in TradingView, I've got one strategy that I still kind of run manually as a day trading strategy, but I kept messing up the position sizing. So I just built a little box that hovers on my chart, that I click on it, and it just updates and says, this is the share size you take. And little things like that can certainly help to a degree, right? I still have to type in the share size, and do things like that, but start to think about that as well. If there is human error, you have to account for that, and you can't just imagine that it's going to go away someday, unless you're going to use a robot to trade for you. It's just finding out, how much is that human error costing me? What can I do to help mitigate that, or remove it entirely?
Yeah, well, I've heard you say before that you feel like you're particularly bad at day trading, or
I am.
everybody is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is bad at this in the moment, right?
Yep.
Everybody lets emotion get in the way. Like it's not unique to you, Michael. Every trader is like this. And if you're not systematizing your routines and automating stuff you do, yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, and they're gonna be very frustrating.
Hmm.
One thing that I did do at one point in my career before I was starting to automate stuff I was doing is I would have recordings taken of my screen as I was trading. So I was trading the first half hour of the day. I was trading a specific strategy. I was getting signals and had windows set up in a certain way so I could see exactly what I wanted to do and then enter the trades manually. I would take a video of my screen and then go back and look afterwards and see, sort of like a neutral observer, where you're looking and saying, okay, well, here's where the signal came in. Here's what I did, and I could see when I'm in this mode. Oh, okay. Well, I I could move the alert window to a different place, and I would be less likely to have missed that trade.
Yep.
It looks like I'm spending a lot of time entering these orders, and I'm making mistakes there. How can so it, when you look at it in this way, there's some things that are going to stick out, and you can really improve what you're doing by doing this. It
Yeah, and
was
that's
very helpful for me.
Small edges, right, that we talk about. For example, I know a lot of traders that won't don't use things like hotkeys or things like that, right? And it's funny as when I traded professionally at the prop firm before there was HFTs and all this kind of stuff, you weren't given a mouse for the first like 3 months of trading. They unplugged it. You'd start up your computer in the
Yeah,
morning, you'd do whatever you need to do with the mouse to sign in, they'd unplug it and they'd take it from you because the idea was using hotkeys are way more efficient than something else. Now,
yeah,
obviously it's 2025, and I think that every order should probably be placed with a robot at some point. But even if you're not there yet, I think a nice baby step is to program some hotkeys for maybe even different strategies where this strategy you're going to take roughly this amount and things like that, and that will really help out. And these are marginal benefits, but now that we're talking about trading in the real world and we're hoping your back test is does have an edge and you have an edge in the system, now it's about kind of milking every last percentage point of edge that you can get out of, because say your system makes 1% a month. Well, if that goes to 1.5% a month at the end of the year in any kind of compounding, you can do the math how different that is. So when you're trading, yeah, these very, very small changes, very, very small edges will add up in a year dramatically. In 10 years, it'll be huge.
yeah. I can. As a software developer, I was the CTO of Trade Ideas for many years. It's always surprising to me when I go and look and see the extent that hotkeys are available in a lot of these platforms. It's pretty like I can tell it was a huge engineering effort to implement a lot of these hotkeys or have this functionality in there.
Hmm.
And I think it's way underutilized. If you haven't looked closely at your hotkey configuration for the platform you use to trade, go take a look because there are a lot of capabilities there, and with just a little bit of ingenuity, you could create some really cool stuff for your workflow. And that's really the first step toward automation. Getting some of these hotkeys where maybe it's not quite automation, but you press one key and your entry order goes in at exactly the right point. It automatically includes some stops along with it. So there are some really cool stuff you could do with hotkeys, and
Hmm.
some of the capabilities I look at from a software development perspective and think, man, okay, this was a huge project to create this, and I know a lot of traders don't even consider using it, but yeah, you should.
Yeah, again, the prop firm back in the day, they would take your mouse away, but there was no buttons on the platform either. There was not a buy or a sell button. Every order had to be entered with the keyboard. And it was kind of cool to see, because you'd walk into the room and there's a bunch of dudes that is all college age or slightly above dudes, and they're all hunched on their keyboard and they've got like weird claw grips on their keyboard because
Yeah,
they could take this again before HFTs. We were kind of the HFT systems at the time, they were taking hundreds of trades a day, and they just had this whole keyboard. They were investing in gamer
yeah,
keyboards with macro keys, and again, this is 20 years ago, right? So that's Doom was probably the craziest game out there, and yeah, just by doing all of this stuff, or mice with like 1,000 keys on them and things like this. But yeah,
yeah.
definitely on the edges, but a way to deal with that. Because as we mentioned, most of the time, your problem is going to be your back test said you should have got filled at $10 and you got filled at 10.25, or didn't get filled at all and it was an amazing trade. So, ways that you can shrink this, again, at the end of the day, fully systematic, like fully the alert sent and order sent, that's the way to go. But, steps along the way, I think certainly can help.
Did I ever tell you about the keyboard that I use? I've been using this style keyboard for probably 25 years now. It has no labels on the keys.
Oh, I've seen some of those. Yeah.
So it forced, like, there's no reason to look at the keyboard
Hmm.
if there's no labels on the keys. So it forces you to be a better typist, to know exactly where those keys are, and to not look at the keyboard. Because if you look at the keyboard, that takes time. And I knew at that point that uh, I wanted to be faster with what I was doing, and
Hmm.
I use VI for my text editing. I use a keyboard with no labels on the keys. So just to, and I wanted to do that to force myself.
Yep.
And I've been using that for 20 years. It's made a huge difference, I think. I just think about the time I've saved with keystrokes over the years and using VI as my code editor for all these years. I mean, it's not going to add up like hour by hour or day by day, but if you look at the aggregate over many years, it's enormous.
Well, and I know this is probably going to go down as the nerdiest podcast out there, but it's 100% true. I've read studies about how just the amount of time you can summarize from someone taking their hand from their keyboard to their mouse
Yeah,
periodically throughout the day, and it was I think it would end up being over an hour within like weeks. It was way more than I thought it would be, and just utilizing things like this because yes, I don't know. There's you talk about all the time that people are going to quit trading during a drawdown. And the reason I think that we're harping so much on this jump from backtest to the real world is because this can be the biggest like dopamine dump letdown of all time is if you've worked
yeah,
days or weeks or even months to get something and it works and it goes to backtest and then you go to trade it and it's an instant letdown.
yeah.
I think not only for you spent the time, you want the system to work, but just for your mental benefit overall, you kind of need that to start doing something in a positive direction, even if you made a whole bunch of mistakes back testing and the returns are 50% of what you thought they were. If they're positive at all, then it's proved to yourself that you can do this process, and then it's just about doing it again. So that's why I think what we're talking about is just so insanely important because I've done that before where I've made a mistake in the back test about fees or commission or slippage or something, and I go to trade the thing, and then you just realize the amount of time that you've wasted, and especially if it's your first time doing it, you may think that the whole process is just a waste of time, and that might be a time that a lot of traders walk away when they're so much closer than they've ever been before. There's just a couple things they have to figure out.
That is a great point, Michael. I love that you brought that up because that's totally true, and that's a little bit what I was saying before. Is you're so optimistic at that point. You're at the most. Your optimism is at an all time high. If you think about
Hmm.
the sort of the lifetime of a strategy, and you're primed for disappointment at this point. So
Yeah.
yeah, I always encourage people. That's why I always say you're not at the end. You're at the very beginning. And the stuff that you learn from that point forward, that's how you get better. That's how you get great as a trader is understanding how that strategy falls short of the back test, why, what you can do to improve your back test going forward. That's how you get better. And a lot of traders don't even get to that point, or they throw their hands up in the air saying, well, the back test sucks or whatever.
Hmm. And
That is,
I
and that's a missed opportunity.
Well, and just to go back to the Reddit that we keep trolling on, there's so many people that you can see that when you're reading that are just jaded on the whole process of backtesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably what happened to them is they had a backtest that looked great, then they went and they tested it in the real world and it just failed miserably. And you almost want to grab them and say, all is not lost. You either learn something through your backtest being horrible, or there's just a missing link that you then have to go fix. And to lose hope again at this moment, I think really sucks. There's a lot of times in trading to lose hope. So there seems like always
Yeah.
the next time is to lose hope, but to do so just then, before you've seen any benefit, I think is the worst because it's a lot easier. You say you even only have 6 months of good 6 months, and then something happens in the market and your system stops working as well. The fact that you've kind of tasted a bit of success, I think it's a lot easier to motivate yourself to kind of get back to work to see that success again. Whereas if you lose it at that very moment, you spent all that time and all it did was cost you some money when you went live. That to me is just it's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah. And the traders that really turn the corner are the ones that in that moment where you could throw up your hands, you could blame the back tester, you could blame the market, you could blame anybody else but yourself, right?
Hmm.
when the traders that really do well turn the corner, it's in that moment when they understand that there's nobody else to blame but themselves.
Yep.
Like you can do it, but there's nobody out there that's gonna like you have to do it yourself and you have to take full control and full responsibility of your trading. And that involves understanding the constraints,
Hmm.
understanding what you can control about the market and what you can't. And really diving into that and like I said, taking full honest responsibility for what you're doing, that's when traders really turn the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Dave, do you have any other final words about? We went. This was a very rant nerd version of this, but I like it. But just before we leave, is there any one piece of advice that you would give? Something that we may have missed talking about?
I think the main takeaway here is when you get to that point, you're at the beginning, not the end.
Right.
Understand that you're at your most optimistic point. So take that into account and understand that there's a lot to learn from that point forward. And and if you go in with that mindset, I think you're primed for learning rather than primed for, okay, here's where all the profits start coming in and I can go rest on easy street.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is that, kind of just to reiterate in a different way of what you just said there, is that you are not you're not trading, you're not going to trade live at that point. I think that's kind of a mental game that you can play with yourself. And you said at the beginning of the podcast is that you are just gathering more information, and that's how I try to look at it. It's like, okay, I've done the back test. A lot of people think, okay, my job's done, it's time to trade it live. In my head, I just kind of frame it as, okay, now it's time for just more data. I
Yeah.
think this is why I always joke about why we call it forward testing when it's just trading. But I think there might actually be a good idea to frame it, to call it that in your head, at least call it forward testing, because that's essentially what you're doing is you're just saying, okay, now I'm just testing still. I'm just doing it with real money, and then go from there. Because yeah, I think again, a lot of people get into a lot of problems by saying, okay, now I'm done and I'm trading now. Good for me, I'm a trader, as opposed to I just have more testing to do.
Yeah. The way I like to frame it is uh, this point is you're getting feedback from the best traders in the world for free. When
Oh,
you
that's a
take
good way.
a
Yeah,
strategy
I like that.
live, you're getting honest feedback from the best traders in the world at that moment.
Well,
So that's the mindset to be in when you do it.
oh, I like that. I think that's great. I think that's a good place to end it. Again, we have no idea how long this mini series is going to go, but I'm having a great time. So we're just going to keep going as long as we believe it to be the best thing to do, and I hope you guys are appreciating it as well. We see all the comments, we see all that stuff, and we absolutely love it. But until next time, I'm Michael Noss.
And I'm Dave May. We'll talk to you next week on Line Your Own Pockets.